We continue the series of lectures on the concept of public safety, dead water. And now we begin to address the question of the real structure of our society. We have already discussed that we live in a kingdom of distorted mirrors. One of the distorted mirrors is that we are frightened by all sorts of isms, such as socialism, democratism, monarchism, legal societies, civil societies, and so on. In reality, we have been living in a global slave civilization all along. It's just that at some point, the slave owners of antiquity realized that the best slave is the one who doesn't even understand that he is a slave, but enjoys his chains. And that ancient slave-owning society, which existed in deep antiquity, evolved and modified, but its substantive side remained, meaning its nature remained the same. And now it has ultimately reached its logical conclusion. And we will also talk about this in this lecture. So, let's consider it. We will start with the system of tholo-elitarism, or what we call a tholo-eliter society, beginning with the question of the classification of human labor. Here's another distorted mirror. We are told that labor is divided into mental and physical, which is a lie. Moreover, think about this. I will ask a simple question. Isn't the carpenter who erects the frame a physical labor worker? Does he not think with his head about how to place the walls, where to put the roof? This is a real deception. And in fact, labor is divided into managerial and productive. How did this happen? Let's consider it. Here is a person, the only biological species on Earth that takes ready-made products from nature and takes raw materials from nature to produce products. Well, that is, what do we take from nature? Berries, mushrooms, and other things. And we take raw materials, wood, coal, iron, and so on, for the production of products. And the second point is that the extraction of raw materials has now become the main activity of humans. The development of production has led to the emergence of social labor cooperation, not division, as we are told. In order to produce a certain product, everyone participates in this social labor cooperation to produce something specific. And the main aspect of this social phenomenon is professionalism. That is, the performance of one's specialized activities in a common endeavor for everyone. Now, the labor, as I initially said, is divided into mental and physical. This is a lie. It is incorrect. Initially, labor is divided into productive and managerial. But no one tells us anything about managerial. Why? If productive labor can be measured, the lathe operator produced a part, measured it with calipers. Okay, here's your money. Defect. Sorry. But how can we measure managerial labor if it doesn't even exist and there is only some intellectual labor? This is all done intentionally. Such a division of labor into productive and managerial during the course of the global historical process that we have already examined was of a natural character. And the boundary, the division, occurred in relation to knowledge. That is, we take the ancient primitive society, what we know from history. So the community выделяла from its midst people who stood out with certain abilities. For example, a person could heal others, predict the weather, and so on. Therefore, everyone went hunting for mammoths, and they told him, Ivan Ivanovich, you stay here, take care of the sick, and so on. So, what did this lead to? Such people were freed from the necessity of earning their daily bread, and they had more time to acquire knowledge. That is, figuratively speaking, such Ivan Ivanovich could, after bandaging the wounds of the travelers, he could lie down, throw his head back to the sky, and watch how the stars move, how things change, how the sun rises and sets, and so on. That is, he had free time to acquire various knowledge. And what happens next? The instincts of parental love and self-preservation led to clan closure. That is, such Ivan Ivanovich passed his knowledge on to his children. That is, everyone went hunting for mammoths, gathered mushrooms and roots. And these people, possessing knowledge, kept it, sealed it, and passed it down as inheritance. Well, what we know shamans, the son of a shaman who beat the drum, they, so to speak, have the instincts of parental love, like my son. I will pass this on to him, but I will say nothing to others. That is, I will possess this knowledge. All of this led to the formation of an elite, that is, an elite of society, in quotes, possessing a monopoly on access to knowledge. Everyone who did not belong to the elite was considered by the elite to be the rabble, the crowd. And so two mutually nested pyramids were formed. Here is the structure of the society we live in, and this is knowledge, on the contrary, we will consider now. If we overlay them, there was such a ratio. The structure of society and knowledge here in the next picture, if we take a $1 bill, here it is in front of you. On one side of it, you can see such a pyramid. It is more clearly visible in this picture. So, look, here is the pyramid. Its top is cut off. There is a Masonic eye drawn here. It shines in rays. And at the bottom, it says in Latin, Nus Ordus Teclarum, which translates to Russian as New World Order. This pyramid truly embodies the real structure in which we live. So, this ancient priesthood, which we talked about in ancient Egypt, has degraded, hiding from people the true understanding of the structure of the universe. It has fallen into Tatanism and turned into witchcraft. The priesthood differs from witchcraft in that priests have a connection with God, with the transcendent reality, and have the ability to predict the future, while witchcraft only possesses certain technologies for solving specific issues. In fact, they are closer to that than to priestly functions. This pseudo-priesthood has certain holistic knowledge. The elite possesses factual knowledge, while the masses have fragmented knowledge. Therefore, from the perspective of what we have discussed about the perception of the surrounding world, it turns out that at the top, they have a mosaic perception of the world, that is, a holistic one, and the elite forms a kaleidoscope. In their minds, that is, each honestly does their job, and the masses have holes like a bagel. Hold on tighter to the steering wheel, driver. Therefore, this is how the ancient slave-owning society looks. At the top, the slave owners, below, the overseers, the elite, and even lower, the slaves. Here is this structure depicted on a $1 bill. So, if we talk about religions, and we have already looked at the views of the Bible, there is the Quran, then look at what comes out. Here, the relationship between Judaism and pseudo-Christianity is described in the Jewish theory, stating that you will rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. And for us, it's only pseudo-Christianity, because the teachings of Christ have been distorted, meaning what is being instilled, man, there is no happiness on earth. Happiness is there, in paradise, in heaven. Therefore, if you, God's servant, behave well, obey your masters, all authority is from God, then there, in heaven, you will be happy. Therefore, the meaning of life is to return to the previous lecture. What is the purpose of human existence? His destiny in this world. And what do the Bibles, the so-called sacred writings, tell us? Submit, repent. So, happiness will only be in heaven. So, when people ask the priest, when will happiness be on earth? And this, dear ones, will be during the last judgment. And when will it be, priest? Well, son, no one knows. That is, in fact, this pseudo-Christianity says that there is no happiness on earth and cannot be. And the purpose of a person in this life is to pray, to repent, and only there. After death, he will be happy. Imagine what a trick. At the same time, we do not deny all those moral ideals that true Christianity and the true teachings of Christ carry, but they have distorted the essence. Therefore, we actually have an anti-Christ church in the name of Jesus Christ. That is, there is little left of the teachings of Jesus Christ there. And if we talk about this part, we have 4 Gospels. The Gospel, translated into Russian, means good news. And we have the good news from Mark, Matthew, and John Luke. But we ask, where is the good news from Jesus Christ himself? It turns out there is. So, there are all these 65 so-called apocrypha, legacies from those who came from Jesus Christ. But those who ruled, they chose what they needed, forged it to suit their interests, and so to speak, formed this support for a mass elitist model. And there are teachings of Jesus Christ. Only one is located in the Vatican, and the other in Vienna, in the Gabler Library, one in ancient Aramaic. We retrieved these things, translated them, you can compare, read in the Library of Conceptual Knowledge, we have it. Therefore, through this semi-elitist model of the relationship between religion and Judaism, the chosen of God, and here the slave psychology, hit on the right, offer the left, and so on. Therefore, the world order initially looks like it does now, from the perspective of global politics, which we discussed in the introductory lecture. Here is this world mafia, conditionally speaking. In oil terminology, the global predictor, meaning international financial corporations, clan financial families. And there are these headless mausoleums, country X, country Y, and so on, country Z. Each country has its task in the new world order. Spain is a global resort, Japan high technology, the United States a world police, Russia a resource extraction complex. Each country has its tasks. But we have already discussed this in the introductory lecture. Let's move on. What are the characteristic features of the political model we are talking about? The fact is that there is a difference in the social significance of labor. The labor of a manager is socially significant during the lifetime of their contemporaries. In contrast, the labor of a producer may be recognized and valued decades or even centuries later. That is, imagine a sculptor who created a sculpture. His product is what he produced, an informational product. The sculpture, fellow countrymen walk by and say, it's not interesting here at all. But then, 100, 200 years later, they start to admire it. Look at it. And another chairman of a collective farm, for example, people's lives depend on how he manages. Whether the bus goes to the city, whether the equipment in the kindergarten is updated, whether there is heating or not, and so on. Whether gas has been brought to the village or not. That is, the labor of a manager is socially significant during the lives of these people. And productive labor can be recognized and valued after a long time. But from this, naturally, come the corresponding conclusions. So, in terms of labor payment and so on, that is, people depend on it. Our life, salaries, pensions, and so on depend not on how we work, but on how we are managed. The difference in the ability to replace each other, I have already told you about Chubai and Chernomyrdin. That is, if you send all this elite to the forest to cut down trees, they will quickly learn to saw wood with a two-man saw called friend. But if you put an illiterate lumberjack as a minister, he won't cope right away. By the way, this is used by globalizers. That is, when they carry out revolutions and so on, the elite is destroyed. And the people, they themselves are nothing. They lack management skills, and you can take them with bare hands. Right now, such a situation is being created by the so-called patriotic parties, meaning to eliminate all of them, beat, chop, crush, and so on. What was done in 1917 was exactly this. That is, by the hands of the people, meaning ministers, capitalists were lifted on pitchforks, and all landlords, counts, and princes were driven away all over the world. Officers of the white armies killing each other fell on the battlefields, and the country collapsed. And who captured it? The Trotskyists. That is, Ilyich arrived in a sealed carriage from Switzerland, and Lev Davidovich, known as Trotsky, came on a steamer from America, and they took the country with bare hands. There was no one to manage it, and all the commissars were Jews. So they commanded all the camps, the gulags, and after Lenin, Stalin inherited a devastated country. And what problems did Stalin have? The entire management corps was Jewish, and how could he replace them? And he seated workers at desks and so on, while they prepared, growing into factory directors, into ministers. Time is required. Right now, a similar situation exists. During the reforms of democracy, So, who came again? The clans we already talked about, the Yeltsin family, the Lushkov family. So they, so to speak, seized everything, and now the people want Putin to perform a miracle. But how to deal with them, and whom to appoint? Here you have, so to speak, the principle of the totalitarian pyramid. The monopoly on knowledge, appropriated by the elite, allowed them to set a monopolistically high price on the products of their labor. And they all sat down, so to speak, and assigned themselves such salaries. But what is the product of labor? The quality of management. We will consider the quality of management in a sufficiently general theory of management. And look at how they set it up. Was Yeltsin a good manager or not? Some say he led Russia on the path of reforms. Great. And others say the bastard should be put against the wall. The country has died. He missed it. Why does this happen? There is no measure, nothing to assess the quality of managerial labor. What to measure the quality of management of a governor, mayor, minister with? There is none. In the concept of public safety, when we move further into a sufficiently general theory of management, we discuss what measure can be used to assess the quality of a manager's labor. And this monopolistic knowledge led to a monopoly on a higher standard of living, which is incorrectly referred to as exploitation and so on. The whole issue lies in management. This led to clan closure, essentially mafioso, of the elite in Tiberias. Why? Because the minister's son does not marry the daughter of a summer worker or a laundress. Well, probabilistically there is, of course, a separate case, but overall in mass statistics, if you take all our elite, those shown on television, patriots, oppositionists, all these deputies in the State Duma, pseudo-communists, democratizers and others, they are all intertwined with clan ties. Zhuganov's son works for a firm owned by oligarchs and so on. This is now known to the people. That's the whole tale about the white bull. Therefore, all of them are elites up there. They don't care about the people, the country, and so on, especially since they got involved in the Harvard Project. This situation, everything we have listed, has led to social injustice, which is called the exploitation of man by man. And what is the injustice? Do you remember, during the debates in the university, for the State Duma elections, when we had a discussion with the party on live TV, we asked him, Grigory Alexievich, what do you understand by justice? He couldn't. It was as if he swallowed his tongue. He couldn't even respond. What do you understand by justice? Social justice is that people need to be given the opportunity to acquire any knowledge, and then in this lies the highest justice, so that a person can understand everything on their own. Our current system, as they say, is not needed. Here it is, come to me, and I will explain how to live. There is a similar hierarchy in the church. What do you want to communicate with God through me? Come to me, Father, tell me everything in confession, and I will intercede before the Almighty. It's also a hierarchy, the same totalitarian system, that is, the masses and the chosen ones. Here is the structure of a totalitarian system. Therefore, justice is in giving people knowledge. But in such a totalitarian system, what the crowd one is forced to endure, why Because the removal of the previous elite will lead to a decline in the quality of governance for the time necessary to establish a new management body. And this period was measurable with the lifespan of a person, and this forces the crowd to endure the elite so as not to fall into even worse living conditions. And I told you about civil war. So why did our country collapse then? Was the elite destroyed? Yes, it was bad, worthless, but the new one was not ready. And now remember what I told Rocklin to the deceased. Look, when we take the Kremlin, then we'll figure it out. I say, but what? Then, remember the funnel with stepped edges. One cannot surpass the measure of development. If you enter the Kremlin as Lev Yakovlevich wanted, what will happen at that moment? Shamil will say, as long as there is chaos in Moscow, we Tatars will separate. The same goes for the Yakuts, and the disintegration of Russia will begin. The USSR was dismembered, but there are plans for the dismemberment of Russia. So Rocklin, a patriot for the people, would have acted against his own country. Do you feel the cunning? This understanding is only provided by the concept of public safety. And when the crowd stops tolerating this, it leads to revolutions, riots, and pogroms. But there will always be someone who uses this discontent of their own. And all of human history is in this. So the proof is now even in the example of revolution. What is the conclusion from this? The stability of relationships between people in a crowd-based pyramid is supported by a stable, measured delivery of knowledge. That is a pyramid of knowledge. That is, this pyramid is stable. As long as the pyramid of knowledge is stable. If the pyramid of knowledge collapses, then the pyramid of the structure of society will also collapse. That is, in the people, as they say, every cricket knows its own stick. Going against the authorities means writing against the wind, and it will always end in failure. That is, the law of the henhouse is that the upper ones foul the lower ones. People understand all this, but they express it in their own lexical forms, not understanding, not being able to endow it all with a clear measure of understanding. In the concept of public safety, all this folk wisdom is expressed in strict lexical forms. The permissiveness of the crowd and the permissiveness of the elite. Don't think that the crowd is good and the elite is bad. No. The crowd is an irresponsible mass of people who believe that only those at the top should think, and we are facing this now. That is, it goes to the people, these simple people who seem to be good and simple. They say, why should I think? There he is a giraffe, he knows better. That is, what am I? I am a small person, I am outside of politics. How do we see it? For fools, for suckers, politics is a dirty business. Why are you going into politics? We, the Jews, will deal with this politics ourselves, and you stay out of politics. And our suckers say, I am outside of politics, I am outside of politics. Well, then stay out of politics. So what do you want? For someone to come, a kind uncle, bam, and everything will be fine. A miracle. The elite. This is also a crowd, but even more irresponsible than the masses. The masses at least feed children, raise livestock, harvest, and so on, while the only difference is that they have access to education, and since they consider themselves the elite, they can act with impunity. But the elite is also a way of life, preserved by clans and mafias. The elite's self-awareness manifests in their organization and permissiveness towards others. They can conduct all sorts of experiments on people, carry out reforms like Gaidar. Now think about it. We were talking about types of psyche. After all, what did Gaidar actually do? He implemented Yavlinsky's 500 days program. So there is no difference between them. Grishka stepped aside while Igorushka carried it all out. But as a result of the actions of these democratizers, millions of our elderly men and women ended up impoverished. The country has been brought low, completely devastated. Do they not know integrals and differentials? Have they read few books? No. And this defines the type of psyche we talked about. But since they are Auni, many admire the now late Nikita Moiseev. So, He presented a formula at that time, about 2 years before his death, in an elite collection. He said this: up top, meaning in the Kremlin there may be scoundrels and villains, but they can be there. Why? Because they are smart, and they are allowed a lot. Because they are smart, meaning they have an education. Can you imagine the cynicism? We are ruled by smart scoundrels and rogues, and we as a crowd have resigned ourselves. Well, they are smart after all. But how does their intelligence manifest? And this cynicism allows them to realize themselves in all these immoral reforms and so on. There is a good verbal formula that Vissarion-Belinsky used to define the crowd. He said, the crowd is a gathering of people who live by tradition and reason according to authorities. The community of tradition unites the crowd. And what is tradition? It is a myth. Holy Rus, Cyril, and Methodius, thank you for bringing writing to Rus. These are Christians. And the other pagans, they say Rus is pagan. And they are ready to kill each other. This means that history turns out to be a powerful weapon. Historical myths that are imposed on millions of people, this pleases the crowd. Authorities and traditions can control such a crowd that forms these myths. And he who shapes both traditions and leaders controls the entire society. Here is a totalitarian system. It is very beneficial. Why are authorities needed? Because everything can be blamed on the authorities. Here, if we talk about how they made Yeltsin an authority figure as a Democrat and so on, that's it. And then he became unnecessary to them. Moreover, I have already said why the boss said that Yeltsin should be shot like Ceausescu, along with his entire family. After all, this is a fact. He said it on television and on the radio. And why? Because all these bosses, now deputies of the State Duma, robbed during Yeltsin's time. That is, they created one authority, a leader, who caused the revolution in Russia. And then when they plundered, who is to blame? The leader. The leader is against the wall. And what are we to do? We are not to blame. That is very beneficial for them. The same thing. Many admire Lukashenko now, and they are making him a similar leader. When the leader is removed, the crowd turns into rabble. And I have been to Minsk several times. How is it there? They're simple people. All the students understand, but the simple people do not speak. If you go to the father, yes, if the father tells, then the father will make reforms, he will give me some money, and we will live well. That is, there is no need to think, there is a post, you need to go to it. So where are such leaders formed? In the mass media, who refused. Vladimir Vladimirovich Posner said, now Posner is aging, he is an authority, pay attention to how he manipulates all the politicians and so on. But why is he manipulating? Think about this program Vremena that Posner hosts. What do you learn there? This one said, that one said something. What does it end with? Posner summarizes everything. And he says, well, we have deliberated, there are many opinions, there is this opinion. Perhaps there will come a time when everything will change. Cuckoo, that is, there is nothing. Now Posner is aging, who will replace him?